Today's episode is brought to you by 2AT Fitness and the Brew Bar.
Everything sequel contains explicit language. And why the fudge not, you melon farmer?
Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel podcast, the Karate Kid edition. My name is Michael Shantz. I'm from the How Dare You Awards. With me today, your friend and mine, Tom Stewart from Lonesome Whistle Productions. Tom, we got the Karate Kid Part 2 today. What do you got for us?
Honk! The arc of this movie
is that
sound. This movie bends on an arc that begins and starts with honk.
Oh, that doesn't make me gleeful with the prospects of defending this movie.
Well, I gotta say, at least one of those scenes is certainly my favorite in the movie.
I'm gonna guess it's the beginning one.
Yep. Yep, this movie is over at 5 minutes in.
Ladies and gentlemen, of course, today we are talking about the 1986 sequel, The Karate Kid Part 2, a sequel to the smash hit 1984's Karate Kid, both movies directed by John G. Avildsen of the Rocky Balboa fame. Rocky, Rocky 5, Lean on Me as well, Tom.
If you insist.
All I'm saying is this man can make good movies. Sequels, not his thing.
I have a yeah. Well, we covered this somewhat in our ranking episode, but at least where sport, I'll refine my position. At least where sports sequels are concerned, John G. Avildsen only has a couple of moves that and they all end up turning out the same. This movie begins in the showers.
My first note.
As does Rocky 5. So he's obviously his sense of like how you start a sports sequel is you immediately get the person who's just won the tournament and follow them into the shower, which is a little bit creepy.
One of my first notes is I'm wary of a 50-year-old man just sitting outside of the showers in which there's like a dozen 15-year-old boys. That's not good.
And then if anyone asked why we were doing this, his answer would be, "Oh, I do this at the beginning of every sequel," which is not going to comfort anyone.
No.
Wow.
All right, so let's get into it. Tom inexplicably ranks these movies 3 the best, 2 then 4. Yeah. I say 2 is the best of the sequels, then 3 and 4. Yeah. Tom was very interested to see how I will defend myself. You're absolutely right. I do at least declare this a bad movie. It's bad.
Do, yeah.
All 3 of these movies are bad sequels bad movies.
Least worst.
This is least worst. And I was surprised by that.
Yeah.
I remember thinking, of course, when you're a kid, you go see a movie. I was like, that was a pretty good sequel.
Right.
I like that. So I remembered it as a good movie. And as I'm watching it, I kept, at a certain point early on, I thought, oh, man, not good. Well, this movie's not good. But I will, as my opening salvo, Mr. Tom Stewart, I will tell you that this movie has a 45% on Rotten Tomatoes as opposed to number 3, which has a 15%, which means most of America's critics are on my side. This movie, on a budget of $13 million, made $115 million. And with essentially the same budget, 12.5 Karate Kid Part 3 made $38.9 million.
Mm.
So not only did audiences agree with me, but so did critics. The floor is yours.
Well, it starts in a very promising way. We pick up, in the shower.
So you didn't mind
No.
mind the going back to the original Karate Kid scenes?
Well, I mean, this is my problem with, I think...
It bothered me the least in this movie, I'll say that.
They pick up, for those of you who don't know, this movie famously, I think, is one of the examples that people cites when they talk about picking up a sequel that picks up directly after the original ends. Like, it's so close. It's
Halloween 2 style.
It's so continuous that we apparently have to begin in the showers.
Yeah, I know.
But the biggest problem with this scene, because I like everything that happens in this scene, there's a kind of rumble in the parking lot between between both the masters and the students. First of all, it's John Kreese turning on his own student, and then it's Miyagi and Kreese fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Which, I mean, if you've just seen The Karate Kid, that's exactly what you want to happen next. And so it must be exciting that it's happening so soon. But the big problem with all of this is it's just a complete bait and switch, because as soon as this is over, we have a text on screen that says 6 months later.
Right.
So that everything that we've just seen is rendered virtually meangless. There was no reason.
Well, and my understanding,
there was no reason to have this scene in the movie, except to give the legacy characters something to do before they disappear from the movie forever.
And to set up the next sequel, I suppose, which you love. But my understanding is they really wanted to shoot this scene for the first movie, which would have been disastrous, because you want to end that movie on the high, exactly as they did with him, with the Karate Kid, hoisting his trophy as Miyagi looks on with great pride and the soaring music. That's how you end that movie.
I disagree. I think it should have ended with Miyagi tweaking John Kreese's nose and saying "honk." It would have been a good post-credit sequence. You got to give me that.
Okay, I would have gone along with that. If it was at the end of the credits, I'm all for it.
Everyone's leaving the theater. They look back. They see, oh, there's more. There's more. Honk. Yeah. And it's like,
But my favorite part of that entire scene is after the honking, they're walking back to their car, and Ralph Macchio says, "You could have killed him, huh?" And he says, "Aye." And he says, "Why didn't you?" I just thought, because it's murder. What are you talking about? Why did I not murder him?
Well, that's, as you say, that sets up Daniel's portrayal of Miyagi in Part 3.
Yes.
Because if he's got that on his mind, then, Terry Silver can really get in there and manipulate him.
Oh, man.
He's better off with Silver anyway. Miyagi's just gonna make him build a house for him or something.
Yeah, you're taking this child labor thing.
Well,
seriously.
Very soon after the time lapse, there's a really important moment that the film kind of glosses over, where Miyagi sort of says, "Okay, Daniel, here's a new lesson for you. You need to build this. I don't know what it is, like an outdoor structure.
Yeah,
you need to help me build.
It's going to be a guest room.
This guest room." And he says, like, "It's interesting how every lesson involves me doing a piece of work for you." And I'm like, yes, yeah. This is the problem with these movies is that Daniel is Miyagi's main source of unpaid labor, and he exploits that through the entire sequels.
This is a different time, Tom. This is where young people were expected to...
What is wax on, wax off, but, child labor?
I'll tell you what it is. It's blocking a kick.
Yeah, but he didn't need to get him to wash his car to teach him that lesson. He could just say, "Hey, block the
It
kick."
provides the repetitive motion that you need, as well as strengthening your arms. It's training.
For more work that I'm going to give you and not pay you for.
Right. Your payment is your knowledge and your training, your ability to not get hit.
that he then immediately forgets. I mean, yeah, he really needs it in those 3 minutes of karate in this movie. And that's generous to say 3 minutes. Probably more like 1.5.
I forgot to mention in that opening scene, by the way, I have a note here that says, man, Martin Kove is pretty extra. He's got a turtleneck and a jacket with the collar turned up. It's all tan.
Well, he has to look special because it's his only scene in the movie. But also, he gets a credit in the title.
Yeah, I know.
That I've never seen before. Martin Kove returning as John Kreese.
Right.
Or Kreese, one of those. I was thinking, and then, in the credits, it's that the Cobra Kai students are listed as returning as the Cobras, which makes it sound far more exciting than what actually happened in that scene.
Yeah.
But
you want a dance number.
Yeah, it feels kind of oddly contractual. Like, I don't know. It's like it's sort of, it's kind of writing into the credits almost that these characters don't need to be in this movie, but we're bringing them back because they were in the first movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they insisted on that credit. It sounds like it.
The other thing.
But
The other thing before we've got this beginning scene and then we've got the child labor, but
Yeah.
there's the real important narrative that's just, and it happens in all the movies, is it's just thrown in there very quick, that his girlfriend's gone. I've never seen a boy who moves on more quickly based solely on the script that says he must.
Yeah.
Like when a woman leaves Daniel's life, man, she's gone for fucking ever.
Yeah. As soon it's true. And I mean, let's face it. So the two women in the sequels that he's dating, one lives in Okinawa, so there's obviously, you can anticipate some trouble there. The other is in Los Angeles, but she's actually from Columbus, Ohio.
Well, I'll tell you the other problem, that she's actually 16 years old and he's like a 28-year-old man. So in real life, and so it was Ralph Macchio himself that said, I think we should just be friends. Let's put that in the script.
So yeah, so just
sorry, we're jumping ahead to
no,
number
we're not
3
jumping
though.
ahead at all. It's exactly where we are. We've Miyagi continues his child labor exploitation, and Daniel's coming back from the prom.
Yes,
that's in this movie, right?
Correct.
And he garbles something about how that actress is not going to be in the movie
after wrecking his car.
Right.
which is a bold move.
And then
to give Allie wrecks his car and then says, by the way, I've fallen in love with a football player.
Right. And there's a similar kind of in a similar way, Daniel's mother, who doesn't even appear in this movie, not even not even Die Hard Al style on the phone as she does in the next movie. And then again, they come up with some bullshit reason why she's not around. She gets a job in Fresno? Is that what happens? It's all flooding back to me now. She gets a job. She's like, oh, she's got a job in Fresno.
Yeah, I'm getting them confused because in one of them the uncle is sick.
That's the next one.
Okay.
The next one is the sneezing uncle in the background.
Yeah, which you like.
I don't like. So there's a number of kind of absurd reasons why Daniel is not living with his mother and is now rooming with Miyagi, and all this is set up in this, and we also it's 6 months later as opposed to 2 years later. So, but on the plus side, Miyagi finally catches that fly.
Yes,
that has eluded him for so many years. Seems like, I mean, that's. In the early part of this movie, I think we're just trying to pay off things we set up in the first movie, but in a way that is extremely unsatisfying It shoots its load very early on. I mean, in Rocky V, John G. Avildsen's kind of denouement is based around a street rumble. Here we get it in the first 2 minutes of the movie. Right? So everything Avildsen wants to achieve with a sports sequel, he has done within 5 minutes.
So is your biggest complaint that we move on from the Kreese character?
Not specifically that. I mean, I think we could have conceivably gone on to a different story and just left all that behind. That would have been fine by me. I just don't. I mean, I just didn't want this to become, like an actionless version of the Seven Samurai. Which is what it becomes. I think the turn it takes. Again, we talk about this all the time. You know, this trope, this cliche of, you know, sequel doesn't have any ideas about where to go next, so they change the locale. They go abroad.
Right.
They go to another country, and that's what we do here. And to me, we're there for the rest of the movie. There's not even a bit where he comes back at the end. We're there for the rest of the movie.
Oh yeah.
And nothing particularly about Okinawa excites me at all. I mean, I love a tea ceremony, but
as much as the next guy.
As much as the next one.
I like myself a good tea ceremony as much as the next guy, but come on.
I think a 5-minute long tea ceremony requires an inhuman amount of patience that I just don't have. In a movie called, let's not forget, The Karate Kid. That is not the traditional Japanese art I thought I would be watching.
Can't disagree with you.
And I know that's
but the crimes of this movie are
there's only about 10 minutes of karate in the first 3 movies.
Right. Yeah.
Combined. But this is particularly egregious because it's replacing it with compared to what the next movie does to make things like gardening exciting, this does not do the same for me with, you know, traditional Japanese dance, tea ceremonies, farming. It's laborious. It feels like what it is, which is not very interesting.
Are you sure that this isn't your Britishness just leaning in towards your lack of patience? You know, your like if your people can't conquer these people, I don't want to learn anything about them. Is that it?
Well, colonialism is behind everything I say and think. Too much so that we just can't be specific. We can't, you know, break it down. We can't keep breaking it down and saying what's colonialism behind. You know, that's the answer's always going to be that.
Because I remember upon my first viewing of this movie way back, that was one of the things I liked. I liked every little touch of sort of trying to learn about that culture.
Right.
Even though it's shot in Hawaii.
I think this would be my criticism applied to all of these movies, is that it promises something that it doesn't deliver. And when, skipping ahead just a little bit, but when Miyagi and Daniel get kidnapped from the airport in Okinawa,
yeah, I have a note.
A la the movie Dr. No.
Yeah.
I really thought I was in for some kind of, basically a Japanese gangster film. The fact that there's a military presence there, I thought was going to go somewhere, and apart from, you know, Daniel winning a bet off some GIs, that's about it.
It goes nowhere. I agree. But I have a note on that kidnapping. My first note was, man, like hanging out with Miyagi is putting your life in jeopardy an alarming amount of times. Like,
Yeah, I like the idea. I feel like they never capitalize on the genre possibilities of what we're doing here, even to the extent that once the story in Okinawa gets going, it's kind of a Seven Samurai traditional sort of Kurosawa-ish kind of story of bandits and farmers, basically.
right.
But even that, it doesn't go anywhere, and as soon as there looks like there's going to be any fighting, a storm hits and fucks everything up.
Well, this movie, its biggest problem is within the narrative, but we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I will tell you what I think is the biggest problem for this movie. Fair?
Yeah.
All right. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back after this. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out 2AT Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. 2AT Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out 2AT Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back. Tom and I are here talking about the 1986 film, The Karate Kid 2, Part 2, I should say. So, Tom...
I mean, that's another lie.
I want to get it right.
That's another bait and switch. Because part 2 suggests a continuation, and we have an entirely different story here, disguised as a continuation.
Well, so let me ask you about that, because we had talked in our introductory episode, the rankings. We were talking about Back to the Future movies, and that's what this movie reminds me of, that series, because now and I admit your movie's called The Karate Kid Part 2. It's still The Karate Kid, but we're a little bit more focused on Miyagi in this story, like we are Doc Brown in Back to the Future 3. And I don't mind that. I mean, we're in Okinawa. We're learning about him, his past, his family, his grievance with another man, if you want to call it, like grievance to the death.
I have two.
That in and of itself doesn't bother me. So
no,
is that...
I agree. That in and of itself doesn't bother me. The only things I would note about that, first of all, it made me wonder that if John G. Avildsen directed Rocky 2, would it have all been about Mickey?
Mm-hmm.
And the second part of that is, were you as surprised as I was to find out that Miyagi's father was still alive?
Yes, yeah.
No offense to Pat Morita, who's aging perfectly well. But when you see a man of that age, you don't automatically expect him to have a living father.
Although I don't think he was even 60 years old yet in this movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, maybe he was not aging as well as I thought he was.
In actual life. So.
In actual life, yeah.
I don't know how old the character was supposed to be.
Yeah, it was a little. I mean, obviously they need to find some reason that he'd go to Okinawa. They've got a bunch of bullshit reasons why Daniel has to go with him.
Yeah,
None of which makes sense.
None of it
and all
makes
of which
sense.
are garbled as he gets on the plane.
Right, and that's where this movie, that was one of my notes where when he goes to the airport, and this is the thing about Miyagi, because Miyagi is constantly looking out for Daniel, and
not true.
Well, no, but I'm saying
just to keep him strong enough to work for him.
He says he is, but so you have this scene in which, Daniel comes to the airport, and he's like, "I've got my ticket," and he's like, "No, that's for." He keeps telling him that you have to stay, and it's for your college tuition. And then there's always this moment where he just smiles benignly, like at his good friend, and thinks Daniel's the best. And he goes, "Okay, come on." So in the end, he's always working against Daniel.
Yeah.
In what
working against his best interest.
Yeah, exactly.
And don't think this is the basic. I want to tell you something that actually does kind of impress me about these movies is that the money that Daniel pays for this ticket. We follow this trail like it was an episode of The Wire.
Yeah.
Through the next two movies.
I know. We
follow this money. This money is possibly the strongest continuing thread.
Through line. Yeah, exactly.
Through line is this you when you hear about this you think, okay, so Daniel spent all this money, that'll be the end of it. No.
Right.
No. It becomes extremely important. But but also when you look at it over that time, you realize that Miyagi's really playing a long game. that ends with Daniel buying a bonsai shop for him.
Right.
And he's engineered it every step of the way.
It's the long con.
Yeah, it's like Daniel pays for the ticket, then Daniel wins the money back. I give him his college tuition back. Then he suddenly decides not to go to college and buy me a store because I pretend that I lost my job. Perfect.
All right.
Anyway, but my point was that it seemed an odd reason for him to go to Okinawa, but I guess there is no good reason, and you just have,
Yeah, it's just to serve the purposes of the script, and
also
that's what's bad.
Later on in the movie, they make an equivalence between Daniel losing his father and Miyagi losing his father. I'm like, okay, that's not the same, right? You are an old man.
You're an old man. I lost my dad when I was like 10.
Yeah, Yeah. So it's like the movie is clutching at straws to make that idea of going to visit his dying father work.
Hey, look, this whole series is nothing but clutching at straws. So
agreed.
Don't tell me that number 3 does not have some of the biggest clutching at straws you'll ever see in the history of filmdom, my friend.
No, that's very true. But at least it's not. At least the first thing that happens in the movie is they get on a plane and go to Japan. It's set in LA in a karate class. Okay, so that's already better.
I disagree, kind of. No, I don't really, but. So I don't have a problem with them going to Okinawa. How they get there, how Daniel gets there, like all of that is suspect and not really great. And you're right about it being a trope.
Yeah.
But I was always okay with it. I thought it opened up an avenue for their relationship to grow and their friendship to grow and for Daniel to learn more. And at least there is somewhat that in this movie. It's nowhere near the original. And that's a problem with all these sequels is how does Daniel grow as both a person and a student? And I think he grows the most in this sequel compared to the next sequel. In the next sequel, he fucking regresses, for Christ's sake. But
I think that's a more interesting development. I mean,
It doesn't
don't
seem
know.
true
What-
to
what
his
is- what
character.
is he-
It doesn't. It can't sustain. It doesn't even sustain itself in the
Oh,
movie
you
for
are
longer than
seri-
10
you
or
are
15 minutes.
seriously- You are seriously underestimating this David Mamet level long con that Terry Silver and John Kreese are involved in. The smartest guy in the world would fall for all of that.
Oh my
And
god!
but I don't. What does Daniel learn? What does Daniel learn in this movie? I don't understand.
The drum punch.
Well, at least that drum thing paid off because I was tired of fucking seeing it.
So listen, here's the biggest problem with this movie.
Oh, here we go.
The biggest problem with this movie is like an hour and 50, I think, 3 minutes long.
You
And
could have told me it was 3 years long, and I would have agreed with you.
the biggest problem with this movie is that it has the same scene in the second act repeated like a dozen times.
Oh, interesting.
Starting with getting kidnapped at the airport,
Huh.
and then until you get to the final fight. This movie is nothing but Sato and his nephew threatening Miyagi and Daniel. And that's all it is. Repeated scenes of that.
Yeah.
And that's, at a certain point, I was like, get on with it. At another point, I was like, get on a fucking plane. Problem solved.
Yeah.
But they keep hanging around. Then his father dies. I'm like, certainly you could get on a plane now.
Yep.
But
You've
they
achieved
don't.
your objective.
Yeah. And that's the biggest problem with this movie. That's where this movie is really messy and stupid and not good.
Well, I absolutely agree with you that while we're on the subject of repeating scenes, I think it's interesting that and in and of itself, I don't have a problem with it, but the way it's done in the movie, I do. So we have the scene which appears in every single one of these movies, including Next Karate Kid, where the Karate Kid is set upon by a gang of his adversaries.
Mm-hmm.
And Miyagi comes in and cleans the floor with them all and saves
Right.
Daniel, or what's the name of the other one?
Oh my God. You're right. I don't know.
We failed an exam that we set ourselves. You had to learn one thing, the name of the characters.
I don't remember.
You didn't do it. Hilary Swank.
We just know it's Hilary Swank. Yeah, that's,
So we have that scene pretty much verbatim as it is in the first movie here. But in the highlights reel that begins the movie that we discussed in the previous episode, that scene is recapped. So they're recapping a recap.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems weird that you would. I mean, it's not weird that a sequel would plagiarize a scene from the first movie, but it's weird that you would put that scene as the original version of that scene in the sequel, so we could both go,
Right. Yeah.
that's exactly the same.
Yeah. Right.
It's inviting it's inviting an unfavorable comparison upon itself that you would just enjoy it as one of the things that happens in these movies. Right? You would just enjoy it as a trope. But as it is, you're like, you guys have really got to get some new material.
Yeah. Right.
So I don't like this movie when it's trying to be like the original. I don't like this movie when it's trying not to be like the original. I like virtually nothing about the movie. Yeah.
I like Daniel's new budding love.
Kumiko?
I think she's great.
I as a character is great. I don't like that her presence in a scene locks us into observing full-length versions of Japanese traditional rituals like dancing or tea ceremonies. So as soon as you see her on screen, I'm like, oh, we're gonna have to sit through a dance or something now. But yeah, she's fine. I mean, that's the really hard thing to take about these movies is in all their kind of like dating scenes, it reminds me how much I really like Ralph Macchio as an actor. And I've seen him in stuff since. He's in The Juice. He's very good in that.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see him in Cobra Kai again. But he is so affable and so lovable.
Absolutely.
He's like it's like early, going back to the Rocky, the John G. Avildsen Rocky. John G. Avildsen's really good at those kind of like soft-hearted, tough guys, basically. Yeah. Like guys who can be tough, but essentially they're just these lovable little kids.
Well, that's the other thing about this character is he never seems tough, even though he knows things that could hurt people.
Yeah. And I think, it's great, but I'm just like, I mean, it's, well, I mean, I guess I have to admit it's the fault of the third film for not continuing that relationship, because
aha.
But even though I didn't know even though I didn't know Kumiko was going to be in the third movie, I still felt like we were wasting a lot of time on this.
Really?
Yeah.
I love Kumiko. I there's little moments too, like
she's played really well. I love that actress.
Yeah, she's great. What's her name? Tamlin Tonada, I think.
Yeah, she's in Man in the High Castle. She's great.
Yeah. And there's a moment when they're having their tea ceremony and he sits down and he kind of realizes what's happening and he makes a joke.
Yeah.
And there's a cultural moment there where she said, like, just with a look, she kind of says, "You're being a dick." Like, be respectful of this moment. And you see that wash across his face. And I always really like that moment. It's him learning about her culture and realizing I need to be respectful in this moment. I really like that.
Okay. Oh, but and I felt like I understood what John G. Avildsen and the writers were trying to say about Japan and its relationship to the US. I mean, that's pretty clear.
Yeah.
Aside from the fact that I have a conspiracy theory about Miyagi, there is something similar to the shower scene, which is a little weird about. I mean, so we're to understand Miyagi is a stone cold pacifist, right?
Well,
I mean, at least in principle.
Yes.
I mean, it's like it's the sort of martial arts movie trope.
In name only.
Well, Kung Fu is basically that. It's like, I will not fight you, and by the end, he's kicking the shit out of everyone.
Right.
But it's always in self-defense, at least, at least technically.
Or in Daniel's defense, not his own.
But this doesn't seem to stop him using Daniel to turn a quick buck at that bar with the ice chop challenge.
He's just trying to get Daniel his money back. That's all.
Why are you defending this man so much?
Because I love Mr. Miyagi.
But what kind of lesson is that teaching Daniel? It's like, hey, if you're ever in financial strait, go and
gamble.
Exploit the knowledge I've given you to cheat money out of a few GIs in a bar.
He also gets to show up Sato and his nephew.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me ask you about that, too, because in each of these movies, in each sequel, yeah. Like the biggest problem is, and it's funny because your favorite movie of these sequels, the third one, brings back a villain from the first one, but all the villains in all the movies...
And a villain that could have been in the first one, but of course wasn't because it's a sequel.
Yeah.
Retcon. And one that everyone knows and everyone's been talking about, just not on screen.
Yeah. But to me, all the villains are ridiculous. All the villains are not fully formed. They're not good. They don't compare to the original. But of the villains, I like these two the best. I think they're way better, more grounded than the villains in the third and fourth movie.
I thought that that there was a nice twist on. there's so much doubling that goes on in this movie. So even the only way that I can kind of rationalize having that parking lot rumble at the beginning of the movie is that scene where Kreese disowns his student.
Mm-hmm.
Because we get the reverse of that when Sato disowns his student, but for dishonor.
Right.
So I can see that happening, and that is something we haven't, the sets up the possibility that the student can portray the master, or can I don't know, can behave dishonorably when the master behaves honorably.
That's the thing I found interesting about this movie, and that's why I think I like it the most of the 3 sequels, is because that idea of honor, Sato's been carrying this grudge, and he thinks he's been doing it for his honor for however long it's been, 40 years or whatever. It's nonsense that all of a sudden, after a storm, he's like, I've been a dick. And you know what I mean? So, but
yeah, it is.
But I like that this movie plays with the idea of honor and dishonor and what that means to these characters and how it plays out. And to me, it's fundamentally more interesting than this revenge nonsense that is just pure fucking melodrama in the third movie.
Well, yeah, I'm not. I agree with the melodrama bit, and I see that as a pro. Because you know what melodrama is? Eventful. Things happen. There's a plot. I mean, you alluded to it that it's just a repetition of the same scene. It's also they're just trying to put as many obstacles they can in the way of Miyagi fighting,
right,
which he never does again in the movie.
Right.
And it's like, I'm going to fight you, but because...
To save the village.
To save the village. And it's like, okay, we're going to have the fight. Storm happens.
No fight.
No fight.
Fight called off.
Yeah. So basically, they got to the point where it's like, what possible reason could we not have for Miyagi to fight Sato? And they're like, weather?
Yeah. I can't say it's not stupid, but at the same time, you have the role reversal, and the nephew takes on the baddie role. And I liked that guy as an actor. I always thought he was good in that movie.
Yeah, I don't think I have any problems with the performances. I mean, the nephew is in an unfortunate position because when they arrive at the airport, he says something like, in Okinawa, it's useful to speak good English.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, it's useful to... It's like, I know for a fact in Okinawa, people generally don't speak English. Like, it's kind of well-known, rural Japan, they fucking don't. They do in movies where you don't want to bother with subtitles.
Of course.
So he always seems a little kind of... And then everyone starts talking to Miyagi in English. It's like, he's from here,
right?
Yeah. So he's got a lot of ADR issues, not as many as the ADR issues in the third movie.
Yes, thank you.
Are very problematic, but there's a hint of it here because you get this weird thing where the Japanese actors are talking in English and dubbed in English. So that they're being dubbed, but they're still talking in English.
Right.
It's just a weird convention of the movie.
I don't disagree. All right, we're going to take another break, and when we come back, we will finish up with Karate Kid Part 2, right after this.
If you're anything like me, you spend the majority of the day wondering whether you want coffee, beer, or wine. Whichever way you fall, Brew Bar has you covered. Located in the heart of 3rd Avenue Village in glorious downtown Chula Vista, California, which is also my neck of the woods, Brew Bar is a coffee shop, bar, and eatery rolled into one delightful package. Tim and Alex run the place, and let me tell you, listeners, these guys know their coffee. And after you've been in their company, so will you. They turned me on to pour over, and it's literally all I drink now. If for some crazy reason you don't want to try the best coffee in the world, they've got espresso drinks, all kinds of teas, and even coffee cocktails. You heard me? Coffee tails. And we're just getting started. Bottle service on craft beer and wine, alcoholic and caffeinated potions, an all-day food menu with plenty of vegan options. All served up in an atmosphere hip enough to know you're getting the best quality, but not too hip that you feel the need to drive to 7-Eleven and get a bucket of brown swill. Brew Bar. It's the best place to be for beer, wine, coffee, and tea. And if you go, you might even see me.
And we are back again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here finishing up the Karate Kid Part 2. Tom really doesn't like this movie.
You know what? You know what? I'm gonna be I'm putting up a good front, but you are making some salient points about what I initially considered to be a complete waste of time, which is the Okinawa section of this movie.
That's the whole fucking movie.
That's the whole fucking movie. Yeah, but I'm starting to see that in pockets it's not so bad. I just think if it had gone where I assumed it was going, it would have been, in so many ways, it would have been a much better movie. I think I've alluded to it already. Once we get to that tea ceremony, 5 minutes worth of tea ceremony and less than that of karate. You can't call this movie The Karate Kid and that be the case.
Yeah.
It should be called The Tea Ceremony Kid. For as much as, as much karate as there is in the movie.
I will take the last fight of this movie over anything else in any of the other sequels, though.
Okay. Even
though I don't think it's great.
But isn't this again, isn't this Rocky 5 all over? I mean, isn't this? No,
it's where they are, Tom. They're in Okinawa. There's not an All Valley Championship in Okinawa.
Look, the wrong choice was going to Okinawa. Don't you are saddled with this, okay? You find a fucking downtown Okinawa karate tournament if you're gonna go to Okinawa. That's your problem, John G. Avildsen. It's not my problem that you went to Okinawa.
I disagree completely. This movie does the one thing that you're supposed to do in a sequel, which is raise the stakes. This fight is supposed to be for your life. It doesn't end up being that. Of course, we have the honk come back. But all that
I love that every argument you have defending this movie just falls apart like at the end. It's like
I don't think it completely does fall apart though, because the reason it doesn't.
Your arguments do, but
how dare you?
No.
It does not completely fall apart because we're dealing with Daniel LaRusso. He's the one having the fight. His value system says, I will not kill this man. So live or die, man. Your choice. Die. Wrong. Just doing what his master taught him. Honk. And that stays in line with his character.
So you like the fact that Rocky 5 doesn't end in a boxing match but ends in a street fight.
You're saying that's apples to apples. I'm saying it's apples to a Buick Century. I don't equate Rocky 5 with this movie.
Are they our new sponsors? Where did that come
from? I don't see Rocky 5.
0% interest available.
I don't see it comparable to this movie at all. And I hate that Rocky 5 ends in the street.
Miyagi says it's not a tournament, it's real.
Yeah.
That's the whole idea behind Rocky 5 subtitle, there's no fights. That's the same. That's like just the same John G. Avildsen sequel bullshit.
I can agree with that.
but I don't.
But it's the least offensive of all these sequels to me.
You really think this is better than? There's like.
I think it is way better than the end of Karate Kid
the next
3.
Karate Kid. I agree with you.
No.
No, you said it.
I did not.
I finished your sentence.
I
but
was
you said it.
interrupted. I think it's way better than the Karate Kid aerobics done at the end of Karate Kid 3.
Well, I guess I okay. So even if you do like this sequence, and in essence I don't, it's like 2 or 3 moves at most. Okay, that we see in this movie. There is, I mean, 3 has just more karate in, basically. I mean, that's a fact. That's a statistical fact. But also, you know, there's a through line. I mean, this is just like, it comes out of nowhere. Like, we're gonna fight now, so we've had no fucking training.
Right.
This is a mid-80s sports movie that doesn't have a training montage.
No montage, but we have.
And no training.
There's a training moment. There are training moments.
Apart from Miyagi saying it's not a tournament, it's real. What is the training moment?
Well, you have them in the dojo. Really, there's just like one scene of them kind of. It does look like kind of like what's from 3, the kata, which is looks. I call it the karate aerobics.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, no.
So you have that moment, and then they go to the pier.
Oh, you're right.
And he learns the drum technique. The one thing I love about these movies too is whenever Daniel learns something that Miyagi says, if you do it right, it cannot be defended, and somebody always defends it. So in the first movie, he learns the crane technique, which the baddie in this movie just says, psh, fuck you.
What are Miyagi's credentials? Is that ever established?
Taught by his fisherman father.
Well, Daniel meets. I'm trying to think because he's not. He doesn't run a karate class.
No.
When Daniel meets him, he's the super of the building, right?
Yes. Well, this is where there's plenty of racism to go around in these movies as well.
Has anyone looked into Miyagi's, training? Like, what?
Isn't his training self-evident? He brought that kid to the All Valley Tournament Championship.
Oh, I think Daniel did that for himself.
Get the fuck out of here!
No, I think he's just playing. He's like Daniel's figuring it all out. Because he's a smart kid, and Miyagi's there going, I'll throw enough Zen sayings his way to make him think I'm a karate master.
Oh,
I'll set a motion in plan to stop him going to college and giving me his college tuition.
Listen,
in a way that makes it look like I gave him the money.
I'm all for laying into Mr. Miyagi for sport. But now your hatred has tipped over into an inappropriate line, sir. He is teaching that boy.
What do you think of ending the movie without anyone having learned anything and just the victory moment? Do you think that works here in the way it did in the first movie?
No.
No.
Of course not.
That's a problem that we're ending on that moment because there's so much left unresolved there. I mean, all of this is a tangent anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, I don't know if by that point it would have redeemed the movie at all to see them going back to America, and I mean, I don't know what they do.
Yeah, what are you looking for? Like them on the plane discussing what they learned?
Well, that's it. I don't know what. I mean, it's just a vacation where
the only person with an arc in this movie is Sato, who has a full kindness recovery.
he goes from
He goes from 100 to 0.
he goes from a Bond villain to Miyagi's pacifist equal.
There's a line at one point when he comes back after the storm and he's giving the deed of the village back and he's going to help them. And he says, Sato says something like, please accept my apologies. And Miyagi says, oh, Sato, nothing to forgive. And I'm like, yeah, there is. There's a fucking lot of shit to forgive. Sato's been fucking doing some bad shit.
Yeah.
And he should be apologizing, but
I guess, the honks, well, we've talked about this. The honks are the arc of the movie.
yeah.
It kind of brings everything full circle. It implicitly, if not in reality, justifies having that opening scene. Because, without the two honks to kind of sew the movie together, you could conceivably begin this movie in Japan or on the plane.
Right.
Because literally nothing else of significance happens in America. I suppose you'd have to explain why.
No, like everything else.
Miyagi's kidnapped Daniel, but
everything
that isn't well explained anyway.
Everything at the beginning of this movie is only there to answer the questions you would have if we started it later. What's his mom doing? What does she think of him going to Japan? Where's his girlfriend? They're all just sort of the nitpick questions, and that's just the way they decided to handle that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, well, I did. I mean, I can see, and again, it's something that in the abstract I kind of appreciate. I appreciate when sequels pay off something from the original movie that's left hanging. But here it feels like ticking boxes, like he catches the fly, he beats up Kreese in the parking lot, but saves his life. All those, it just feels like there's a line I think about, I don't know if it's midway through the movie, it's difficult to tell where this movie's midway is, because it seems so fucking long.
One of the many threatening scenes. Fight,
but I think
you're in trouble.
I think it's during one of those training moments
that you didn't think was in there.
Says, "Oh, that I didn't think was in there," which is why I forgot until now. He says, "I guess that's why I won the tournament."
And
I'm like, there's got to be a better way dramatically to. I like that idea. I like that he keeps training him, that he doesn't fully realize the significance of what he's achieved and why he's achieved it. But it's not like a life lesson that he learns. I think it's just Miyagi saying, I don't know, you weren't aggressive or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, that's why I won the tournament. It's like, that line of dialogue is depressingly literal, for what you could have done with that idea of
there's lots of stuff in this movie left on the table. You got a little dash of American imperialism that just, goes away and never referred to again.
We talked about Rocky V deja vu. Did you also feel a little bit of Rambo First Blood Part 2 deja vu in the scenes with Kimiko?
No, not really.
Okay. Because when the helicopter was in the background.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but
I was worried for a second that she was gonna get knocked off at one point. She's threatened at several points.
That's true.
In this movie by Sato's nephew, and I appreciate structurally all the doubling and doppelgangers, and the Miyagi's romance echoes Daniel's romance, but again, it's too much of that false equivalency. He's meeting Kimiko for the first time as a teenager. This is not the woman he's loved all his life.
Well, and the other thing about
hasn't seen for 50 years.
Well, and it's funny you say about, Miyagi's love interest, because, it's as though Daniel learned from him because, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, Daniel, man, once a woman leaves his life, she's forgotten forever. And of course, his love interest doesn't come home with him.
No. Well,
And she specifically says, take me with you at some point during this movie, and he does not. And that's never referred to or talked about in another one of the sequels.
Oh, it is. They deal with Kimiko at the beginning of.
Oh no, I'm not talking about Kumiko. I'm talking about Miyagi's love interest.
Right. Yes. Ah, yeah, that's right. That is left hanging in the air. I totally forgot about that. But I thought but maybe I really got the sense that this is like lots of classic junctures in sequels where there are like two alternative roads that they can take, and one of the roads would be to double down on Okinawa and to have Kimiko go forward, to have further, both romances go somewhere and carry over into the next film. And I get the sense that they're keeping that option open. Of course, the first thing that the next movie does is Alien 3 everything.
Oh yeah.
And
nix it all.
It's interesting to me. It's like it's sort of when you watch sequels back to back, you begin to see the road not taken. And
sure.
Here I think there is a path for these stories to continue, but we do a 360 reverse in the opposite direction, and it's just interesting. And that happens so often in film series.
Sure.
To just like, it's it's implicitly the beginning of Karate Kid 3, although it doesn't take Okinawa out of canon, it might as well do that because it's admitting everything we did there was kind of a mistake. That's the feeling I get. Maybe that's why I like Karate Kid 3 so much.
Yeah, that is not the feeling I get, my friend.
I agree entirely with its founding principles.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, we are never going to agree on this. Listeners, you're gonna have to maybe settle this bet for us. Tell us what you think. We have hashed out Karate Kid 2 as much as we can. Up next is Karate Kid 3. I'm gonna wipe the floor with you on that one, Tom. I can't wait to hear why you like this movie so much. It's such a piece of shit.
I don't know why. I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to sit down on a Sunday afternoon and watch this movie. I'm serious.
Because I have common sense.
I feel like, if I was
to get a root canal, to have my balls cut off,
I am
to be bloodletted.
I am perplexed about what agonizes you about this movie, because even the bad things in it are fun. This movie's no fucking fun.
I disagree.
I feel like I went to Okinawa and went on the most boring tour that they offer of that island.
Get the fuck out of here.
It's like, oh, by the way, there's gangsters and a big conglomerate over there. We're not going to go there. Over here, there's like GIs in a bar and a rock and roll dance. We'll see that for about a minute, and then we'll go and do a tea ceremony for 20 minutes.
This tea ceremony keeps growing in your mind. It goes from 3 minutes to 5 minutes to 20 minutes. You are full of shit. Listen to me.
Honestly, you could have told me that an hour had passed, and I would not have said anything. Why is that the least edited sequence in the movie? Anyway.
All right.
I'm gonna take a Prozac.
Please.
And, I'll see you on the next one, people.
Go ahead and settle this bet for us, everyone, please. I know I'm right. Tom, I think you're a man on an island by yourself on this one. We'll find out. Ladies and gentlemen, please find the Everything Sequel podcast on Facebook, find us on Instagram, find us on Twitter, and let us know what you think about Karate Kid Part 2. Send us an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com. Please rate and review us. It really helps. For Tom Stewart, the British badass. My name is Michael Shantz. We'll be talking to you soon when we talk about Karate Kid Part 3. Say goodbye, Tom.
The best sequel in the series is coming up, as Mike said.
Karate Kid 2. I'm telling you this.
It justifies its Part 3.
No, Karate Kid 2.
This is...
It's the best around. Nothing's ever gonna take you down. Bye.